Samuel, this is in case you missed. This is what we did today. The term should be on the lab. Female reproductive. So here we go, we've got these cross sections. What you have here is, this is the uterus. It's got 3 layers. The outer layer is either visceral peritoneum or perimetrium. The middle layer is smooth muscle, it's called myometrium. And then lining the lumen is the endometrium. This is kind of the main body of the uterus. The downstream end where it communicates with the vaginal canal, that's the cervix right there. This piece here that projects above the uterine tubes, which come out here and over here, that's the fundus. Stick this back on. So here's the fundus sticking out here. You can see the uterine tubes, one projecting to the right, one projecting to the left. Now, at the end, the uterine tubes are open next to this thing here, which is an ovary. You have another one right here, that's the ovary. The flared out portion kind of looks like a funnel, that's the infundibulum. And the finger-like projections sticking out are the fimbriae. Those help to ensure that the oocyte, when it's released, is drawn into the uterine tube. It's got an expanded area right here that's usually referred to as the ampulla. Some ligaments. You'll see a little round ligament going from the uterus to the ovary. That is the ovarian ligament. Then you see a round ligament going from the uterus, the abdominal wall. That's the round ligament. And there's a broad ligament. You cannot see it on this model. Pull this one up. Here's the uterus, vaginal canal. These flat ligaments right here, this is the broad ligament, which actually is connected to the ovary and the ovarian ligament there as well, and the uterine tube. All of this is broad ligament. And on this one you have the vaginal canal. Ignore the baby, it's not quite to scale. This is the hymen here, it's a partial septum covering the opening to the vaginal canal. This is an enlarged ovary. You'll also have an ovary slide, which is on the endocrine system slides. So this whole thing is an ovary, and they're showing you different stages of development of the ovarian follicles. These little yellow round things here, these are called primordial follicles. There's huge numbers of them just along the outer edge or cortex of the ovary. They're only showing a few on this model. These are the primordial follicles. You'd be born with those. After sexual maturity and the influence of FSH, some of these primordial follicles will develop into primary follicles, which have the oocyte, but then the cells around them are much thicker, cuboidal cells, rather than the squamous cells around the primordial follicles. So these are primary follicles, these are primordial. Under the continued influence of FSH, the follicle will get bigger, then it will begin to swell up with fluid, forming a secondary follicle, and this one is actually mature or break-in follicle. This huge fluid-filled antrum, it's in the process of ovulating, that's the oocyte, so that's a mature follicle. Once this follicle ruptures, the remnants, kind of shaded in yellow here, of the exploded follicle, or ovulated follicle, will fill in with cells under the influence of LH, or luteinizing hormone, and they will form a corpus luteum, these yellow bodies here. Corpus luteum will function if there's not a pregnancy for about 10 days. They secrete a lot of estrogen as well as progesterone. After 10 days, they regress or involute and become these little gray brain-looking things here. These are the corpus albicans, which ultimately would just end up being scar tissue in the ovary.
What was the artery one?
This little bit here I'll just mention, that's an ovarian ligament, not a uterine tube. The uterine tube would not be connected to the ovary. So that's a uterine tube, or ovarian ligament. Sorry. Then, you need to run and get all this stuff.
This whole thing's the artery. Yeah, okay. This whole thing's the artery.
We did a few developments, slides and models as well. On this one, don't worry too much about this. These are showing you ovarian follicles, but I don't like the way they're designed. This is a sperm with the head, the midpiece, and the flagellum. The head has a nucleus with a DNA, an acrosome. The midpiece has mitochondria, and the flagellum is for locomotion. When the sperm contacts an egg and fertilizes it, that's what they're sort of showing you here. That's a zygote, the first cell of a new individual. After about 24 hours in a human, the zygote will begin to develop. The first thing you'll notice in human development is rapid mitotic divisions, which are referred to as cleavage. So that one cell, a zygote, will divide into two. That's the cleavage furrow. That's representing cleavage. Then 4, then 8 cells, and 16 cells. So it's just rapid mitotic division with no growth. That's what characterizes the developmental stage called cleavage. At the end of cleavage, you have a solid ball of cells called a morula. At that point, cleavage is over. Of course, development is not, and mitosis will continue, but no more cleavage. What will happen next is this solid ball of cells. The cells will become secretory, they will swell up, and you'll have these big, hollow, ball-like structures. This whole thing is called a blastocyst, early and late. It's made up of 2 layers of cells. The outer layer is called the trophoblast cells. They will not make up part of the embryo. They will form some of the extra embryonic membranes we will talk about shortly. Then there's an inner mass of cells here called the embryoblast. That will produce the embryo's parts, the arms, legs, guts, brains, all of that. So that's a blastocyst made up of a trophoblast on the outside and an inner cell mass or embryoblast on the inside. Same thing here, different model. Zygote, the first cell, this represents cleavage. It's divided into 2, into 4, 8, and this is your morula or solid ball of cells, which will then swell up with fluid. And these are color-coded. You can see the trophoblast cells and the embryoblast of the whole thing, which is a blastocyst, early and late. Much later in development, the embryo is now a fetus, which is basically a human with all its parts. It's just really tiny. This model is showing you extra embryonic membranes, which again are genetically fetal cells, but they will not be part of the fetus. They're support structures. This first one in pink is called the chorion, with these projections called chorionic villi. This is what will embed in the inner layer of the uterus, the endometrium, and form the fetus's half of the placenta, which is an exchange structure of how it obtains oxygen, nutrients, and gets rid of waste. Yolk sac in yellow is somewhat vestigial in the human. There's no longer any yolk in it. It is a site of early red blood cell and germline synthesis.
This is really confusing.
This purple one is the amnion. It's a fluid-filled sac that allows the embryo to develop basically in a weightless environment. The last extraembryonic membrane is an allantois, which is not visible in these models. It would form a portion of this umbilical cord. Functionally, in a human, it does not have much function anymore. It simply forms a portion of the urinary bladder. That's about it. We'll leave it at that. Stop it there.